The Colosseum was not built only for entertainment. It was built to control Rome. Its stone arches turned a restless city into an audience, and an audience into a political ritual. When thousands entered the amphitheater, they were not simply escaping daily life. They were stepping into a carefully designed world where the emperor appeared as provider, judge, and master of public emotion. The building promised order after crisis. It transformed noise into ceremony, fear into spectacle, and social tension into a shared event. That is why the Colosseum mattered. It was an arena, but it was also a machine for legitimacy. It taught Romans where they stood, who ruled them, and what the empire claimed to be. To understand the Colosseum, we have to look past the sand and stone and ask why Rome needed such a powerful stage in the first place. That is the key to the whole story. The arena was never separate from politics because politics shaped the arena from the beginning. The answer begins after Nero. His reign left Rome with memories of fire, luxury, suspicion, and a palace complex that many Romans saw as an insult. Nero had taken central land for the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, a private world of lakes, gardens, and imperial fantasy. The Flavians turned that memory against him. Instead of keeping the heart of Rome as a private playground, they filled it with a public monument. This was not a small architectural choice. It was a message. The new dynasty wanted to say that the center of the city belonged to the Roman people again, but only because the emperor chose to give it back. In that sense, the Colosseum was born from political repair. It covered the scar of Nero's image with a new image of controlled generosity. The Flavians did not erase Nero by argument alone. They erased him by changing what Romans could see in the city's center. Vespasian understood that architecture could speak before anyone made a speech. The new amphitheater announced a change in regime. It said that the Flavian dynasty was practical, generous, victorious, and close to the people. It also said that the emperor controlled the city at a scale no private citizen could match. Vespasian had risen after civil war, when Rome had seen rival armies and rival claims to power. A monument this large helped stabilize his rule. It turned victory into stone. It placed the new family beside the most ordinary pleasure of the city, public games. Every arch and corridor repeated the same political sentence. The old chaos was over. The emperor could organize the crowd, feed its expectations, and make Rome feel unified again, even when that unity was carefully staged. A new dynasty needed more than victory coins and official titles. It needed a public memory that ordinary Romans could walk into. Construction demanded the resources of empire. The amphitheater rose from travertine, tough, brick, concrete, iron clamps, skilled labor, and a command structure able to move materials on a massive scale. It was not a random arena built for local amusement. It was the product of a state that could quarry stone, transport it, design foundations, coordinate workers, and complete a building that still dominates the landscape 2,000 years later. Roman engineering was not magic. It was administration, logistics, and experience applied with confidence. The Colosseum shows how Rome turned technical knowledge into political theater. Its size mattered because size itself was part of the message. A ruler who could build this could also claim to manage armies, grain, roads, taxes, crowds, and the visible order of the capital. The result was an urban statement as much as a building. Rome could still organize greatness after fire, civil war, and fear. The completed structure was known in antiquity as the Flavian Amphitheater. The name Colosseum came later, connected to the colossal statue that had stood nearby. But the later name feels right, because the building behaves like a giant. It dominates the eye before the story even begins. Its outer rings of arches do not just hold up stone. They create rhythm, repetition, and authority. The building looks open and accessible, yet it also feels controlled and monumental. That contrast is important. Rome wanted the crowd to enter, but not to feel equal to the power that built the place. The amphitheater welcomed people into a public experience, while reminding them that the experience existed inside an imperial frame. Even the architecture trained the audience before the first event began. Even before a spectator reached a seat, the monument taught scale, stability, and the confidence of a dynasty that wanted permanence. Inside, the Colosseum was a system of movement. Dozens of entrances, corridors, stairways, and passages allowed huge crowds to enter, separate, climb, sit, and leave without turning the building into chaos. This was not a simple pile of seats around sand, it was crowd engineering. The Romans designed routes so that social groups could be directed to different levels. They managed speed, pressure, visibility, and access with architecture. In a city where crowds could become politically dangerous, that mattered. The same structure that entertained the public also disciplined it. People moved through the building according to rank, ticket, gender, legal status, and privilege. The Colosseum was not only a place where Rome watched power. It was a place where the population physically practiced the order of Roman society. This practical intelligence is one reason the Colosseum still feels modern. It solved the problem of moving people at enormous scale. The seating arrangement made hierarchy visible. Senators and elites were closest to the arena. Ordinary citizens sat above them. Women, poorer citizens, and others often occupied more distant spaces. The view of the spectacle depended on the viewer's status. That meant the audience was also part of the spectacle. A Roman sitting high in the building could look down and see the social map of the city arranged in stone. Rank was not an abstract idea. It was distance, access, comfort, shade, and sightline. The Colosseum made inequality public, but it made it feel normal because everyone experienced it inside the same event. This is one reason the building was so effective politically. It gathered the city together while reminding each person that together did not mean equal. The crowd may have shared one building, but it did not share one social experience, and every level made that difference visible. The arena floor hid one of the most important parts of the building, the hypogeum. This underground zone was a network of corridors, chambers, cages, lifts, ramps, and service routes. It made the spectacle feel sudden and impossible. Performers could appear. Animals could be brought upward. Scenery could change. What the audience saw as surprise depended on workers, timing, ropes, platforms, and hidden organization. The hypogeum reveals the Colosseum as a technical machine, not just a stone ball. It also reminds us that Roman spectacle required invisible labor. Beneath the crowd's excitement was a controlled backstage world where people prepared the illusions of power. The empire wanted the surface to feel effortless. The underground spaces show how much planning was needed to make that illusion work. That hidden labor mattered because the emperor's power looked strongest when complicated machinery appeared to produce effortless wonder. The hypogeum also changed what the Colosseum could do. Early traditions about flooded naval displays are debated, and the later underground structure made such performances much harder. What is certain is that the mature arena became a place of carefully staged entrances, movements, and transformations. It could shift from one kind of event to another, keeping the crowd's attention for long programs. The Colosseum was not only about single moments of danger. It was about pacing. Morning events, midday punishments, and afternoon contests could create a rhythm of anticipation. The building helped organize time itself. Audiences did not simply arrive for one fight. They entered a full day of spectacle, where surprise, order, waiting, judgment, and release were arranged by the state. The program could therefore feel like a sequence of surprises, even though every surprise depended on planning, rehearsal, and control. Gladiators were central to the Colosseum's image, but the popular myth is too simple. The arena was not just endless fights to the death. Gladiators were trained performers in a dangerous profession, often managed as valuable assets. Some died. Many did not. Their skill, reputation, discipline, and style mattered to audiences. A contest could display courage, endurance, control, and technique without becoming an automatic execution. That does not make the world gentle. It means the Roman games were more structured than the modern stereotype. The crowd was watching a code of performance as much as violence. A famous gladiator could become a name people remembered, admired, or bet on. The danger was real, but the spectacle depended on rules, expectation, and public recognition. This is why the clean myth of constant death misses the point. The arena sold risk, skill, reputation, and judgment together. A gladiatorial contest was also a conversation between ruler, crowd, and combatant. The audience responded, judged, shouted, favored, and remembered names. The presiding authority could appear merciful, severe, generous, or disciplined. That is why the moment of judgment mattered so much in Roman memory. It turned power into theater. The crowd could feel involved, but the final structure of authority remained above them. This was one of the arena's political tricks. It gave the public emotion, participation, and noise, while keeping the system of decision intact. The Colosseum did not silence the Roman crowd. It used the crowd. It gave people a place to express themselves, then folded that expression back into imperial performance. Public feeling became part of the ruler's stage. Participation was real enough to feel exciting, but limited enough that imperial authority never truly left the center of the frame. The arena also hosted animal hunts and stage displays of conquest. These spectacles were not only about exotic creatures. They were about geography. Animals from distant regions reminded the crowd that Rome's reach extended far beyond Italy. The empire did not appear only as maps, taxes, and soldiers. It appeared as living proof brought into the capital. A creature from North Africa, the Near East, or another frontier could become a symbol of distance conquered and nature controlled. The message was simple but powerful. Rome could bring the world to its center. In visual terms, the arena compressed the empire into one space. The audience did not need to travel to imagine Roman reach. The reach was displayed in front of them, arranged by imperial command. In that sense, the animal displays were imperial geography turned into theater, a map of conquest made visible to the crowd. Public punishments belonged to the darker logic of the arena. They were not presented as private acts. They were made visible, scheduled, and framed as examples of order. For the Roman state, punishment before a crowd did more than remove a condemned person. It taught a lesson about law, obedience, and the consequences of crossing authority. We do not need graphic detail to understand the point. The important fact is that punishment was transformed into public communication. The Colosseum made state power visible in a way that ordinary legal language could not. Fear, justice, revenge, and entertainment could become dangerously mixed. That mixture is part of what makes the building so uncomfortable today. Its beauty cannot be separated from the power it served. The arena therefore joined entertainment and warning, and that combination is exactly what makes the Colosseum morally difficult to admire. The phrase bread and circuses captures part of the truth, but it can be too lazy if we stop there. The shows did not simply distract the poor. They created belonging, rhythm, expectation, and emotional release in a crowded city. Free or subsidized spectacles turned imperial generosity into an experience people could feel. A person might not meet the emperor, but could sit inside a monument built by him, watch events sponsored by power, and leave with the memory of having shared something with Rome itself. The games also helped manage pressure in a city of inequality. They did not solve poverty or conflict, but they gave the population a repeated civic ritual. The crowd was entertained, but it was also organized around gratitude, identity, rivalry, and awe. For Rome, the crowd was not a problem to ignore. It was a force to feed, impress, rank, and redirect. Many myths still cling to the Colosseum. Some are exaggerated, some are misunderstood, and some come from later memory rather than clear ancient evidence. Not every contest ended in death. Not every famous scene shown in films reflects what historians can prove. The idea of constant mass martyrdom in the arena is also more complicated than popular storytelling often suggests. Myths survive because the Colosseum is so visually powerful that people keep filling it with imagined scenes. But the real history is already intense enough. The truth does not need exaggeration. The building was a political monument, technical machine, social diagram, stage of danger, and symbol of imperial control. Separating myth from fact makes the Colosseum more interesting, not less. Good history does not flatten the monument into legend. It lets the facts be complex enough to disturb the legend. The Colosseum changed after antiquity. It was damaged by earthquakes, reused, stripped for materials, occupied, repaired, interpreted, and turned into a symbol. Medieval and early modern Rome saw it as ruin, quarry, shrine, landmark, and memory. That survival matters. A building created for imperial spectacle became something later generations had to explain to themselves. Some saw grandeur, some saw warning, some saw Christian memory. Some saw the power of ancient engineering. Each age placed a new meaning on the same stones. The Colosseum survived because it was too large to disappear and too loaded with meaning to become ordinary. Even in decay, it continued to command attention. Its ruin became part of its authority. The ruin did not end the building's life. It gave the Colosseum a second career as memory, symbol, and argument. Today, the Colosseum is one of the most recognizable ancient monuments on Earth because it condenses Rome into one image. Engineering, crowd control, conquest, violence, spectacle, social order, and imperial self-presentation all meet there. The building is beautiful, but it is not innocent. It asks us to admire the skill of Roman builders while remembering the society that used that skill to stage control. That tension is exactly why the monument still works as history. It refuses to be only a tourist backdrop. When we look at it carefully, we see a city that understood attention as power. The Colosseum did not just hold events. It shaped how people saw Rome, how Rome saw itself, and how later centuries would imagine the Roman Empire. That is why the best view of the monument is not only architectural. It is political, social, technical, and moral at once. The final lesson is not that Rome was uniquely brutal or uniquely brilliant. It was both capable and dangerous in a way that made those qualities support each other. The same civilization that perfected arches, concrete, crowd roads, and monumental design also used public spectacle to display hierarchy and authority. That is why the Colosseum still feels alive. It is not only a ruin of stone, it is a warning about how entertainment can serve power, how crowds can be guided by architecture, and how a state can turn fear, pride, and pleasure into one public ritual. Rome built the Colosseum to show control. Centuries later, the building still controls our imagination, because it forces us to ask what every great arena is really built to do. The Colosseum endures because it is both masterpiece and mirror, showing what a society can build and what it can justify.